Almost every community has an animal shelter or two nearby, and chances are you visited a shelter to adopt one or more dogs or cats. But have you ever wondered about the early animal shelters? Like, what was the first animal shelter in the U.S., and what did it do? I want to welcome back to the program Kate Kelly, author, historian, and media personality. She runs a couple of websites, including America Comes Alive. Hey, Kate.
Thank you very much, Lori. I'm delighted to be here.
Kate, reading your piece about the first animal shelter in the United States, I think I have a new heroine in the world of animal welfare, Carolyn Earl White.
Yes.
Who was Carolyn Earl White, and what was her interest in animal welfare?
You know, she was a very fortunate woman of the 19th century because usually young women didn't exactly get to follow their nose with what interested them. But Carolyn was born to a well-to-do Quaker family in Philadelphia. And as you may or may not know, Quakers were very politically active for the most part, and they were also just more open to the idea of education for girls and that sort of thing. So Carolyn was unusual for her time, but not for her religion and that sort of thing. And one of the things that we don't think about, but she would have been a little girl in about the early 1840s. She was born in 1833. And one of the things that bothered her enormously was walking down the street and seeing the wagons and the wagon owners beating or in some way really mistreating their horses or mules. These were beasts of burden. The men needed them to do their work in order to make their deliveries through town and that sort of thing. And if they felt that the animal wasn't performing up to what they needed, they would beat them. They would do any kind of thing they could do, yelling, throwing them things at them, and that sort of thing. And it really bothered Caroline to the point that she would be just horrified and would then try to avoid those streets because she remembered a particular scene with, some sort of animal abuse happening.
Yeah.
So what was amazing was that she was able to live a life that could go on and figure out a solution to that sort of problem.
So what did she do?
Well, by this time she had gone on, she had married, and the fellow she married was out of her religion. He was Catholic. He was an attorney, but he was also very open-minded, and he supported her in her serious belief in animal rights. And so he became aware that Henry Bergh in New York City was forming the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And so he suggested to his wife that she should go up and meet with Henry Bergh. So she did. And so she came back to Philadelphia and began to set up the Pennsylvania Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. She was soon joined by another fellow who was very interested in the cause, and his name was Colonel Richard Muckle. And they worked together to work on this organization. When the agreement, the legal agreement had to be drawn up for the society, Carolyn invited her husband to do the legal work. And when they specified the board of directors, her husband was on the board of directors, and so was Colonel Muckle, but she was not. Now, nothing is written about whether that upset her, but it was certainly an item of the day that women could participate and be active, but they couldn't do something like be in a board position. So whether she was offended by that or not, we will never know, but today we certainly would be.
That's so interesting. So she's not even allowed to serve on the board of the organization that she started, being that she's a woman, and yet it grew very fast, didn't it?
Yes, it did. That organization started growing, and she decided to fill another need, which was that in 1869 she started the Women's PSPCA. It later became known as the Women's Humane Society, and that was actually the organization that offered the animal refuge, which is what she called it. She was particularly interested in small animals, first dogs, stray dogs, and in that day, again, we have to think about what it was like at the time. There was no rabies vaccine, so animals were very likely to have rabies, and so they were a danger to each other and also to humans if there were too many or if they bit someone. And they also just had pretty much free reign of any community. There was no leash law. They would have been guard dogs, so they would have been important to families, but there would not have been a lot of control of them. And also there would have been no spaying. So there were lots and lots of puppies. So she started this women's refuge and set it up in Ben Salem, Pennsylvania, and offered a place to bring stray animals and was very successful in her effort at taking care of that matter. And people did bring animals, and they were able to run the dog catcher version of their organization where they would pick up stray animals. And so she really did fill a need in that way. They went on from that standpoint to fill another need, and that was that she got a phone call running this organization, and the doctor said, we're doing a lot of medical testing here, and if you would donate some of your extra dogs to us, we would really appreciate it. And with that, Carolyn had another cause, which was forming the Anti-Vivisection Society. So she formed this was a very active organization in London before it was in America, but she was the one that first formed that organization that really is one that still exists today to observe and prevent animals from being test subjects on different things from makeup and medicines and that sort of thing. So she started that as well. And you just look at her life and you think, wow, she did so much, and just by rolling from one experience to another and seeing a need, she had all of these things that she was able to formulate, and things that are still with us today.
So Carolyn Earl White founded the first animal shelter. She championed other causes, like you mentioned, medical testing on animals. And she also was involved in the fight against the abuse of alcohol. Is that correct?
Yes, she felt as though a lot of animal abuse was because men were drinking too much. And so she started establishing water fountains, figuring if you could give free options for people to drink something else, maybe they wouldn't imbibe as much as they did. The water fountains were multi-purpose in the sense that there would also be a trough for for horses or mules or dogs. So that was also a good thing. Whether or not she accomplished the drop in animal abuse by trying to prevent men from drinking as much is certainly nothing that has been proven or written about, but it was an interesting theory. And of course, lots of people went on to be active with the Prohibition movement, so she certainly was not alone in her thinking. But this was also an era when, I guess we still have cockfights, and they had something called dog baiting, where an animal would be tied up so that other animals could attack them. And she just felt as though all those forms of entertainment were particularly enjoyed by men who have drinking too much.
Kay Kelly, I'm really glad you brought this to our attention. Carolyn Earl White is an amazing woman, and more people should know about her work as a pioneer in animal welfare. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I was delighted to be with you. Thank you.